So attendees of this third webinar on ground handling, we're having some technical issues, but we realized we have 205 people already joining, 213. Can you just let us know via a thumbs up if you can hear us? Those participants that have joined us, 216, I see the number increasing steadily. Can you let us know if you can hear?
I can hear you, yes.
Very good. Thank you very much. I see that you can hear us and you can see us as well, I hope. If this is the case, then we can open this third webinar on ground handling. Thank you very much. And we have also opened the Slido that you can see in the app, in the webinar app. You should be able to see a Slido that we will use later on for questions and answers. We will dedicate around 25-30 minutes to your questions, where you will also be able to get direct answers to your questions. And I would now like to open this third webinar on the implementation of the ground handling regulations today, with a focus on oversight and cooperative oversight specifically. I'm very glad that I'm being joined by great panelists today from the competent authorities, because this is about oversight and how in Europe we are going to introduce for the first time oversight of ground handling organizations and what does this mean concretely. And so I'd like to please move to the next slide, where we will again highlight to you that you will be able to use Slido, but you should all be able to see the Slido QR code on your screens when you're joining this webinar. It's on the right-hand side of your screen. And the webinar today is about oversight of organizations providing ground handling services. We will also provide you again an update of the rules, because we understand that many of you maybe join us for the first time and you have not yet followed the other webinars, so you might not know so well where can I find those rules of ground handling, and especially with regards to oversight. So we will use also some time to again explain the rule structure a little bit. Then we will have a panel discussion on oversight.
I'm sorry, somebody was asking to display the QR code again. Maybe they don't see
Okay.
the right-hand side.
So it could be that you do not see the right-hand side of your webinar app. You should actually be able to see the Slido. If you go down in your webinar to apps, there is a little button there on the bottom right-hand side corner of your webinar. If you are able to see it, I hope you are, and you can open or see the Slido app. If it's not possible, then please let me show again this slide now that you just showed. There you can just use your telephone now, and I give you a minute to make a screenshot of this QR code, which should take you to the Slido page, slido.com, with the password ground handling 2025. And you should be able to join from that as well. If you still have issues with the Slido and you cannot access it, don't worry. We are going to show that slide again before we go into the questions and answers. But of course, it's nice to allow you to already put your questions in. Please put your questions into Slido, because it is also important for us that we monitor what is the most important question from you. We have over 200 participants. So if you take the time to go to Slido, make sure you also use the voting button, because you can select those questions that you find are the most pertinent ones. We will not be able to answer 200 questions today, obviously, but we will definitely go by order of priority. So if you select the questions that are the most important to you, we will definitely give that priority. So please use the voting button in Slido, because that gives us a good indication of where we need to focus when we go to the questions. Put your questions in, but also use the voting button. Now, I would like to again go to the agenda of today with the panel discussion on oversight conducted by competent authorities, and with a specific focus on cooperative oversight. And on the next slide, I just give you a quick overview of who you are viewing and listening to today. So my name is Julia Egerer. I'm the head of the section at EASA for aerodromes and ground handling, and I will be your moderator for today. I'm also joined by Chiara Pavoni, who is a ground handling inspector from Italy. Hello, welcome Chiara.
Hello. Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us. And we are also joined by Joe Mas, who is ground handling inspector of the Belgian authority. Hello, bonjour.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Hello, Joe. Then we are also joined by Jonathan Healy, ground handling inspector of the Irish Aviation Authority. Hello. I can't
Hello,
say
everybody.
in the Irish language. I'm sorry about that. I have no idea how to say hello in Gaelic. Then we are also joined by Paul Tibbe, who is an inspector of the competent authority of the Netherlands.
Yeah, good afternoon all.
Hello, Paul. You're joining us here at EASA in the room. And then we are also joined on my right-hand side by Adina Söni, who is the ground handling expert at EASA.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, everyone.
And in the room, we are also joined by Francesca Coloppi and Michel Brock, who are working in the EASA ground handling team. So thank you also for joining us today. So without further ado, I'd like to really focus now on why we are having this focused webinar on oversight in ground handling. What we want to really do is to give you the opportunity, because I don't know right now whether you are joining us from the ground handling industry or from the member states themselves, from the competent authorities. Maybe we will do a little poll to see where the participants are joining us from. But to give you an understanding of what is going to be expected of you if you are a ground handling organization when it comes to oversight, but also what is expected of you from a competent authority point of view on how we foresee oversight of ground handling. So the first topic is why it's so important that ground handling is done by competent authorities. But before we jump into that, we would want to give you a quick update on the rules. So we all know what we are talking about, because this is the baseline. And I give the floor to Adina to let us know how the rules are structured and what does it mean for oversight concretely.
All right, so I'm happy to do the introduction. Thank you, Julia. I will not keep your attention more than 5 minutes. So this is just to set the scene, to know what we are going to talk about. Whenever we refer to oversight, we use this term to always mean the audits and the inspections done by the competent authorities to the organizations providing ground handling services in the European Union member states and in the aerodromes. So the regulation that we are going to talk about today, all the topics that we're going to discuss today, is EU 2025/23. This is the Commission implementing regulation containing requirements for competent authorities to conduct oversight. So this is the regulatory framework. And more precisely, we have several implementing rules. So these are paragraphs and rule numbers in the Commission implementing regulations that cover the oversight, the whole process. So we have one single annex to this Commission implementing regulation. That's why it doesn't have a number, it's just annex. And the relevant parts, implementing rules that we're going to cover today, are in ARGH, OVS, and there is a series of OVS implementing rules. So I will quickly refer to them. The 300 is the implementing rule stating generic requirements for the process of the oversight. Then in 305, we have rules covering the oversight program. 315, I intentionally skip one, a particular rule, that's 310, because that talks about the industry standards and the process. So, but this is not going to be subject of this webinar. We are going to discuss this topic on industry standards in one of the next webinars next year. So then we have Rule 315 that covers the oversight tasks, the general oversight tasks of the competent authorities. OVS 325 that covers the requirements related to the findings, the observations, the corrective actions, and also the enforcement measures that are at the discretion of the competent authorities of every member state. And the last one, which is one of the most important rules in the whole regulatory system on ground handling, is OVS 330. You will hear us very often referring to this rule because this is a very detailed rule on cooperative oversight. And this is not a new concept in the European regulatory system, but it's very, very detailed. It's much more detailed than we have this rule described in any other aviation safety regulation. So a little bit about, this is a page, this is a slide for our newcomers here. So we know that there are people in the ground handling industry for whom EASA is question mark, who is EASA and what is a regulation coming from the European Commission that was drafted or proposed by EASA. So here is a slide where I will quickly explain what is the system by which we regulate in Europe at the European Union level. We have something called the basic regulation, that is the overarching regulatory package that tells EASA what to do and also tells how we should regulate the aviation safety in Europe. This is Regulation 2018-1139, also named, also called as the basic regulation. This is a very high-level document that is adopted and signed in a co-decision by the Parliament and the Council of the European Union. Then the next level of regulatory layer is the one that is adopted and published by the European Commission. These are the Commission regulations. And here is where we have Regulation 23 that I just mentioned. This Commission regulation, this 23 is an implementing regulation. We also have a delegated regulation also published by the Commission. That is Regulation 2025/20, which is applicable to organizations providing ground handling services. Both the basic regulation and everything that comes with the name of a Commission regulation are binding regulatory material. This means that they have to be applied, and that's what the competent authorities are going to look into to see if the ground handling organizations comply with what's written in the regulations, in the Commission regulations. The third layer of regulatory material is something that is produced by EASA directly, and it's published on the EASA website as well. These are the agency decisions. The agency decisions contain certification specifications, which we don't have in the ground handling domain, contain AMC, which is acceptable means of compliance, which are sets of rules that help the ground handling organizations and also the competent authorities to comply with the implementing rules. These are one acceptable means to show compliance with the rules, but it's not the only means. This is something that is published by EASA with the name of AMCs. And also we have guidance material, that's the GM, which is material that is related to examples. It shows examples, it shows, it includes clarifications, further explanations on how some parts of the implementing rules or of the AMCs have to be implemented or should be understood. The guidance material, the AMC and the CSEs are non-binding pieces of material, regulatory material, let's call it like that in a general sense, the regulatory material, which means that if the industry or if the competent authorities come up with different ways to show that they comply with the Commission regulations, these are also acceptable materials. So, EASA decisions, AMC and GM, plus the Commission regulations are put together in something that is usually known in the aviation European safety industry as easy access rules. So this is a non-official document that is published by EASA. We have such documents for every regulation in the aviation safety system. We also have easy access rules for ground handling. So this is a non-official document, but it's created for the ease of use for the industry and for the competent authority, because it puts together in the same document both the implementing rules from a regulation and also the AMC and GM coming from the EASA decisions. And it looks like that. If you search on Google or anywhere on any browser for easy access rules for ground handling or for any other regulation, this is what you will find. What's in blue indicates that this is part of an implementing rule. This is an implementing rule, part of a Commission regulation. Yellow is an EASA AMC, and green is a guidance material, AMC and GM being parts of the EASA decisions. So this is a document that can be used because you see both the implementing rule and any other explanations and means to comply immediately below that relevant implementing rule. So it's all in one go. You don't have to click several pages to open several links to look into these documents separately. You have all in one. So that being said, I think I'm handing it back to you, Julia, for the panel discussion.
Yeah, thank you very much, Adina. So we are spot on time with our first topic of discussion today. That is, why is it important that oversight is actually done by competent authorities? Because maybe many of you that are joining us from the ground handling industry, you know very well that many EU member states, there is no oversight right now directly by the competent authorities. So why did the European Union decide to have oversight done by competent authorities? So how is this ground handling oversight actually done? And what will happen tomorrow when the new ground handling regulations apply? The date of applicability is 28th of March 2028. Today we are still in 2025, so we might think this is very far away into the future, but 2028, believe me or not, is around the corner, and the member states are already preparing a lot. So I give the floor now to you, the panelists. Who would like to answer this question of how is oversight done today and how will it be done in the future?
I would like to start, maybe.
Yes, please, John.
So I would like to give the example of Brussels. So in relation to the regulation on access of the ground handling market, we provide an approval to ground handling companies at Brussels National Airport. So every company would like to do ground handling activities at Brussels National Airport thus requires an approval of the Belgian Civil Aviation Authority. And part of that approval is focused on safety management system. So as part of the approval issue, the approval review, we do a small compliance audit in relation to safety management system, where we focus on the 4 pillars. So this principle, these criteria, with the new regulation from EASA, so as from the 28th of March in 2028, we will have to transfer to the new EASA regulation in relation to the overview of safety management system at Brussels National Airport. So this will be a jump to other regulation as part of linked to the safety management system.
Thank you very much, Joe. So now we've heard the Belgian view on how you will have to adapt to this change. Anybody else from the panelists from the competent authorities? Would you like to add on what you heard from your colleague from Belgium?
Yes, if I can explain the situation. First of all, good afternoon to everyone, and thank you for inviting me to this webinar. I'd like to refer to the first webinar when you, Julia, said that the ground handling was really the last missing piece in the aviation safety puzzle. So the oversight in this field has been done in different ways by aircraft operators, aerodrome operators, or both of them. And sometimes the oversight is done by the authority, as in Belgium, so in Italy. We directly oversee ground handling providers because of the Italian decree that transposes the Directive 96/67. But the purpose of the Directive 96/67 is to regulate the market access, as we say a lot. But since it had to be first transposed into a national law and then implemented, it has had a different application. In Italy, a ground handling provider is requested to have not only the economic and structural requirements stated in the directive, but also some other requirements in some way related to safety. For instance, we ask them to have operation manual, and the aerodrome operator must confirm it complies with aerodrome procedures. So probably we felt the need to cover some aspects of that common laws doesn't, and year after year we adapted our oversight in order to make it more operational and specific for every activity that ground handlers provide. We knew that air operators and aerodrome operators do their oversight too, within the limit of what their regulation requires. But the oversight of the authority is impartial, doesn't have commercial purpose. So it's the institutional one. In the next future, we need to review our directive-based oversight to avoid overlap with the ground handling regulations. So this means we'll have to eliminate everything related to safety and clearly separating the two sectors.
Thank you very much for telling us what it is like here in Italy, Chiara. Specifically, also, we would like to hear from the other panelists, the remaining panelists from the competent authorities. How do you do it today, and what will change tomorrow when the new ground handling rules apply? Chiara also already highlighted the difference with the ground handling directive, but how do you see it from Ireland or from the Netherlands?
I can speak from the Irish perspective first, I guess. We've been doing oversight here for 20 years of ground handlers already, and looking since 2014. So we do our oversight strictly adhering to the AirOps regulation, the EASA AirOps regulation. So we look at ground handling as a contracted activity of the airline. So I'm going in, when I go out and I do look at a ground handler, I'm looking at the airline they are handling, the Irish airline that they are handling, and very specifically that airline and what that airline is contracting the ground handler to do. So if I'm looking at a management system, I'm looking at it from the perspective of the airline's management system. I don't get involved in the ground handler's management system because the responsibility of the staff of the ground handler falls onto the airline. So I'm going in there and asking, so have you had any contact with the airline safety office, for example? 99% of the time, the answer is no. Do you have, if I'm looking at the reporting, it's through the airline. If I'm out on the ramp and it's a group airline, which I've had in the past, and I've seen an aircraft coming in on stand and maybe there's a few mistakes that are worth looking at, but then I look at the tail and I see it doesn't have an Irish flag. It's one of the different group airlines. It's nothing to do with me, which is frustrating and annoying and obviously ridiculous. But what it also means is that the airline isn't able to build up a level of trust in what the ground handler is doing through their management system because their management system doesn't apply. It's the airline's management system that applies. So come March 2028, everything dramatically changes for me in that I now get to go and look directly at the ground handler. It doesn't matter who they handle. If they're in one of my Irish airports, I look directly at them. I look directly at their management system. We get to build up the trust in their management system and the maturity of their management system, which naturally leads to the airline getting to trust the management system. And that can build in that helps us towards that standardization. Right now, an airline has to say, no, look, you need to do it my way because it's my responsibility. You're my responsibility. You must do it my way. In the future, the ground handler can go, well, now it's my responsibility. I'm under the exact same level of oversight with the exact same management system that an airline is overseen with, that an aerodrome is overseen with, we will now oversee the ground handler with. So building up that level of trust, building up that knowledge, building up towards cooperative oversight, which we'll expand on soon in this webinar. It gives us so much strength, and it gives the ground handler so much strength in the maturity, and allows me to help support that maturity and oversee that maturity that gives the trust basis throughout the whole fields, that whole chain within aviation.
Yes, that's very clear. Thank you very much. So a lot of change also in the Irish, from the Irish point of view, being able to actually access ground handling organizations, irrespective of the airline that they're servicing, but really because they are active in Ireland at an aerodrome that is regulated under the EU rules, you will be immediately able to also investigate and ask some questions with regards to safety of that ground handling organization if it's based in your member state. We still haven't heard from the Netherlands. So, Paul, how do you see it? What will really change vis-a-vis today? So, where you already do some sort of safety oversight of ground handling, and with respect to the future when the new ground handling rules will apply?
Yeah, actually, I have to say that I'm a little bit jealous on Johnny's approach with doing oversight already for more than 20 years. Actually, in the Netherlands, we oversight on ground handling organizations is being done like several other member states, mostly through the aircraft operators or aerodrome operators, or via ramp inspections. We got some information from the SAFA teams as well. There's no national ground handling regulation on safety in the Netherlands. So, but fortunately, many ground handling organizations joined the ISEGO program, voluntary or not, but at least there is something. In our oversight through the aircraft operators, we feel we don't come really into contact with the ground handling organizations for several reasons, but we try to. In the future, though, the plan and hope is that in the future, through direct oversight, we as a competent authority get a better picture of the safety issues and the risks and the culture of the ground handling organizations. But also the relationship between the ground handling organizations and the competent authority will be improved by being in close contact. So we both have the same goal, to increase safety, and we are not the enemy. So that's what I also always say, we're not the enemy. We have to do it together. So that would be, in the Netherlands, will be a big challenge as well.
Thank you very much. So this direct oversight, we have already explained that now really well. And we will also, rest assured, explain a little bit more this concept of cooperative oversight that we have also heard from our colleagues. What does it actually mean in the context of the EU? So now we have understood the difference between what we have today in the EU and where we are moving to when the new ground handling regulations apply. In the meantime, I just, before we go to the next question, remind everybody that we have launched a poll. Already 171 persons have replied to the poll, and you have quickly seen the reply already. It's a very simple poll, just asking you where you are joining us from. I think we have now 342 participants to this webinar, which is fantastic. Imagine we would all be in a room with 342 participants. The air would become very thin and we would be probably really overwhelmed seeing so many faces in one room. So thank you again for making time for this webinar during your lunch breaks, maybe with a nice lunch in front of you. So thank you very much again for joining us. And it's just a poll helping us to understand where are you joining us from, whether you are already working in an authority or you work at a ground handling organization. So Adina, what are the majority of the participants, where they're joining us from?
See, what I saw, the majority of participants is coming from the aerodrome operator side this time. I can share again with you shortly the screen so that you can see. So the majority of the people voting comes from the aerodrome operator side. Then the second coming in line is the representation of the ground handling organizations in the room, which is good. Then we have aircraft operators and then competent authorities, but also people coming from other areas, not the ones listed above. Obviously, the competent authorities being the fewest are also shown in the poll as being first. So
that's good to know that we are also expanding our accessibility to ground handling organizations, and that many of you are joining really from the industry, from the aerodrome, or from the ground handling or the aircraft operator side. So that's good for us to know where you're joining us from. Thank you also for participating in this poll. If you have any issues to access the Slido poll, just put it in the chat. We will try to send you again the link. I put in the chat also the link on how to join us with this Slido. So next question that we have in mind, going a little bit further into digging a little bit deeper of what is going to change from today to tomorrow, is what's going to happen to this ground handling directive? Because we have a directive that Chiara from Italy already referred to, that dates from 1996. No, 1996 is that year.
Correct.
1996. So that's a long, long time ago when the EU decided to do something on ground handling. And as Chiara said, it's an economic directive, mainly focusing on the economic actors and with regards to ground handling and the right to access the market. Exactly. So what is actually going to happen to this ground handling directive now from 1996 in this new world that we are getting into with the ground handling regulation? Does it still apply? How will it apply? So maybe Joe and Chiara, you can explain quickly what will change.
Yeah, I think it's a common error when first hearing that a new European ground handling regulation has been published, to believe it's going to replace the current European Directive 96/67 on ground handling, and that is particularly true in Italy. I admit that this was also my thought at the very beginning when the regulation wasn't born yet and there was only a rulemaking task. As said before, directive and regulation have different purposes. The first, regulated ground handling market access at European, I repeat, and states that a ground handler must have some requirements that have nothing to do with safety or almost nothing. The ground handling regulation mandates the implementation of a scalable safety management system for ground handlers with the purpose of improving safety within the sector. And this is required by the basic regulation, as said before, which includes ground handling activities in the aviation safety domain. I'd like to stress that the directive, as you said, Julia, is almost 30 years old now. And during this time, the civil aviation has changed a lot. The traffic has increased. The regulatory framework of civil aviation has changed in every field, not only in the safety, but also in security system, in health and safety at work, in insurance requirements, etc., etc. So I think that it's a natural change. We need a natural change in that. And without a standardized safety regulation for ground handlers, each state used the only basis they had. In our case, in Italy, the directive. On the basis of the directive, we built a national regulation to oversee not only the directive requirements, but also some part of safety requirements. And as I said, to ask ground handling providers to have a manual with specific procedures. With the new regulation, we'll finally be able to divide the two scopes. So the economic one will be stated by the directive until they change it for other regulation. And at the other side, the ground handling regulation that mandates the safety field.
Thank you very much. So clearly distinguishing between the ground handling directive, which is about the economic access to the market, and the ground handling regulation that is about safety. Johnny, do you have, no, I think, sorry, I think this question went actually to Belgium, to Joe. Joe, what would you like to add something on the ground handling directives, especially since you're coming from Belgium? You are always very good with the ground handling directives and all these EU directives anyways. So could you tell us as well, from your point of view, what is going to happen to this ground handling directive from 1996? And is it still going to apply? And how will it apply?
Yes, so from a practical point of view, we also have transferred the directive to national regulation with the option to ask for an approval, to create an approval for ground handling activities at Brussels National Airport. Within that approval, there's a section safety management. And as for the ground handling activities that are within the scope of the new EASA regulation, and then I refer to the 2025-20, Article 1 and 2, the scope of the ground handling activities. For those activities, we have to make sure to change our regulation, our national regulation, and refer for those activities to the new EASA regulation. So we have to do an adjustment prior end of March of 2028 in our national regulation for those dedicated activities, as mentioned in the scope of the new EASA regulation, that we have to follow as for the safety aspect, the new EASA regulation.
So very clear as well. From your point of view, the ground handling directive, even though it's very old, will still apply, but everything that relates to safety, you will comply with the new ground handling regulation, because the regulation is directly applicable in all of the EU member states. So there are some adjustments that have to be made at national level. But
correct, that's
regulated.
The minimum that we have to do. That's correct, yes. So we focus on that as a start, and we'll see what the future will bring with the directive.
So now we have discussed the scope on what is going to happen, but I guess what our audience would be really interested in is how do you actually see it going to work into the future? So how are you actually going to conduct oversight? What kind of oversight cycle are you going to have? So how often do the ground handlers have to expect a visit of the inspector joining them while they are working very hard to make sure that they can do what they are supposed to do, which is to provide ground handling services. So can you share with us a little bit how this oversight will really work in practice? So what's the methodology of this oversight? How will you apply it? What is going to be your role as an inspector? Who would like to take the floor first? Joe as well?
May I?
Jim or Chiara?
Yeah, the oversight will be done not only as a document review, but also through the use of audits, operational inspections, investigation tests, and last but not least, the adoption of appropriate enforcement measures if needed. This approach allows authorities to have the necessary evidence to verify compliance, assess the organization's safety performance, and value further action if required. The overall approach must be risk-based. The competent authority will collect and process information such as the complexity of the organization, service provided, past performance data to prioritize its over-cycle activities. And competent authority may also consider the results of industry audit, but this is the next topic for the webinar. And so as I said before, it's important that the oversight is done by the competent authority, because what we said before, the oversight will work with oversight cycles. The standard planning cycle generally does not exceed 48 months. Starting from the date the initial declaration is received, but it can be extended up to a maximum of 72 months if the ground handling organization demonstrates an effective management system, maintains full control over changes, and has received no level 1 finding during the previous cycle. And this is called an extended cycle. So there will be management of the findings. We will have level 1 findings issued for for any significant non-compliance that seriously impact safety, and the competent authority must take immediate action to limit or prohibit the affected ground handling activities until the organization implements acceptable corrective actions. And level 2 findings issued for non-compliance that could potentially impact safety but are not classified as level 1. And the organization must submit a corrective action plan and failure to submit an acceptable plan or complete the corrective action within the agreed time frame may result in the finding being upgraded to level 1. This is the framework of how the cooperative the oversight work.
Thank you very much for explaining that so well, Chiara, because this is of course a big change for many ground handling organizations, that an oversight cycle as it is regulated is 48 months. I quickly did the math. I think that relates to 4 years, if I'm correct. I'm not very good with math, so 48 months, actually that's minimum of 4 years, but it can be extended if there is no level 1 finding even further. So that is the oversight cycle that we have in the rules, and you explain to us the different categories of findings that we have, level 1 and level 2 findings, and that the organization would have to do a corrective action plan to actually make sure that these findings are properly dealt with. Now, maybe also, Joe, you would like to comment on this, how this oversight is going to work in practice from the point of view. What do you have in mind?
Yes, from a practical point of view, I'm pleased that I'll be part of the working groups that the EASA is organizing in relation to the preparation of these audits. So every topic, every criteria has been transferred from the 2520, has been transferred to dedicated working groups. And we are all preparing the audit listings, the audit questions. And we also had the chance in 2024 to do a mock-up audit with Johnny and Barbara at one of a handler in Europe to practicize the different phases, as mentioned by Chiara, of the audit preparation, the document review, the audit itself, the CAPA, and also the further follow-up. So those 4 phases are very important when setting up the continuous overview of the companies. So we are preparing ourselves, and also I believe that the EASA is setting up mock-up audits for the upcoming years, not with all companies, that will be too much, but there's a good working group environment, and we are preparing the future audits once they will become active as from March 2028. So
thank you very much. You mentioned an important point that many of the industry players already today, they are cooperating with us, so that we also exchange information on how this oversight will actually work. And we are doing this with mock-up audits, you mentioned. Now let's take the case of a pan-European ground handling organization. Of course, we have many small ground handling organizations that are only active at a single aerodrome. We are fully aware of that as well. But now let's switch to the scenario of a ground handling organization that is active in several member states and several aerodromes. And this is where this whole concept of cooperative oversight comes into play. So I want to dedicate some 20 minutes or so on this specific topic of cooperative oversight, because maybe many of you are joining us from ground handling organizations where you have bases in different member states. And you also exchange, of course, you're part of then a ground handling organization that might have a common SMS framework, common training requirements and everything like that. So how we in Europe, how are we going to make sure that such a pan-European ground handling organization can actually be overseen by several competent authorities together? And how are you going to work together? So what is really cooperative oversight? Adina, maybe you can explain that quickly, yes, because that's a concept that not so many of us are familiar with. And as far as I understand, the ground handling rules, it is the first time that we describe cooperative oversight in quite some detail, and that we really also give some very clear instructions to the member states on how this will work.
Yes, exactly. Why we came up with this concept. Actually, we didn't come up with this concept. It already existed, but it was not used to its full potential. It's still not being used to its full potential in the other aviation domains. Why we needed this? Because if you remember the pyramid inverted that I showed to you at the beginning, the basic regulation, that most powerful regulation we have in the European Union to regulate aviation safety, has a sentence that says that the competent authority of a ground handling organization shall be the authority of the aerodromes where that ground handling organization provides services. What does that mean in practice? It means that if a ground handling organization has an imprint over several member states, that ground handling organization will have as many competent authorities as countries where the aerodromes are located. This would have created an almost impossible situation to deal with if it were for every individual competent authority to do the same oversight all over again to the same ground handling organization in all the member states where that organization is present. That is why we needed a very smart and clever and pragmatic approach to make sure that we will have a future effective and efficient cooperative oversight where all the competent authorities of all the member states act as one international team, but as one team. And this is where we see the big value of the European Union, where all the competent authorities can work together to ensure that we will have an efficient oversight. So what happens to a ground handling organization that operates in more than one country, they will be overseen by several competent authorities, but not the same way. We have created this very powerful rule on cooperative oversight to clearly establish and share the responsibilities and the tasks of each competent authority involved in this cooperative oversight. So we decided that the smartest approach to make this oversight efficient to the maximum would be to work in a sort of a hub and spoke model, in which the hub competent authority would be the one in the country where that ground handling organization has its principal place of business, meaning that they are registered there, they take all the biggest decisions for that ground handling organization as a one single entity in that location where the financial decisions are being taken, where the operational decisions, whether to open or to close operations in a country, are being taken. So this is what defines a principal place of business of an organization, and that is where the competent authority, the hub competent authority, will be. The other countries have their own competent authorities, okay, where the ground handling organization provides services, and they will be the spoke competent authorities. So we will differentiate between the tasks of a hub competent authority and those of the spoke competent authorities, while making sure that all the time the competent authorities will share all the information that they have and all the reports and the outcome of their audits and inspections with the other competent authorities involved. So that's how we came up with this concept. That's how we embedded it in the rules very clearly with very many details. And that's what we are working on, EASA and the member states in our ground handling network. But I think we are going to discuss about that a little later on today, where we tell you what we are going to do, what we are doing already for more than a year now. And this is back to you, Julia, because I think that our colleagues in the virtual room have a lot to say about our exercise that we already did last year, but also about what's coming next.
So thank you for giving us the regulatory perspective on what is cooperative oversight. Of course, many of the ground handling organizations have told us we already receive a lot of audits today. We are fully aware of that. So now EU, you add another layer of audits from the member states. And we will address this in a minute. Can we as ground handling organizations expect fewer audits of ground handling organizations as a result of this regulation? But before we come to this question, I'd like to better understand why we actually need this cooperative oversight. You've already explained it, Alina. We need it to be efficient because we want to make sure that we go to the parent company where it has its principal place of business, where many of the decisions are being made when it comes to safety as well, not just the financial and the financial and operational decisions, but also the safety decisions. But I'd like to nevertheless drill a little bit deeper, maybe with Johnny and Paul and Joe as well, on why do we really need this cooperative oversight? Can you give us more examples? So I'd like to start with Johnny, please. Why do we need this cooperative oversight?
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head with the word efficiency. It is about efficiency, and it's efficiency for the best use of the time of national authorities, of the ground handlers, to get towards worthwhile, effective oversight that we can then share. And the sharing is quite particular how we do that. For us as a national authority, it's about sharing amongst ourselves the audits that we have. So, and there'll be different types of audits. If we use the main management system one at a principal place of business, so we go and do that audit and whatever time that takes, and then we share it between all the national authorities where that business operates. So now instead of and we'll use the example of Swissport, for example, based in Zurich. So the audit's done in Zurich. I now don't have to do a management system audit in Dublin or Cork or Shannon for where Swissport operate here in Ireland. Instead, I just go and make sure that they are effectively using their management system, which takes a lot of the burden off the ground handler immediately, because I already have that information behind me. But then when I've done that audit, and I put that into our system as well, using our shared audit sheet, so we're all auditing off the same questions, obviously off the same implementing rules. I can look and see from other audits, do we have systemic issues? Or my colleagues in the other member states can look at my audit and see what's gone on there. And an immediate saving is, like I'd look at, right now when I audit an AOC, I go all around Europe and the world. So let's say I've been to Italy numerous times and done audits in Italy of our Irish AOCs that operate there. I don't have to do that anymore. Now I go onto a system and I look at the audit Chiara did, and I'm happy. As long as I see everything's good there, I don't have any, from the risk-based point of view, have any concerns. That's that audit done. I can just concern myself with in Ireland and take that burden off of the ground handler in Italy, for example, or take the burden off myself. But we get to having those management systems audits lets us focus in on where those problems are. And then of course we also have the benefits where a ground handler, if they wish, it's nothing to do with us and the national authorities, but if they wish, they can share their audits with their airlines, the people who've contracted them for business. And certainly from my side here in Ireland, with my Irish airlines, I would expect my Irish airlines, if they haven't any risk issues they've already deemed at that ground handler, use that audit into your management system and don't burden them with another audit. You have what will be the gold standard. It will be a non-commercial, based off every aspect of the operation being looked at. It's not like an airline will go out and audit a ground handler, but if they don't do de-icing for them, they're not going to audit the de-icing. If they don't use air bridges at that airport, they're not going to audit the air bridges. We go out and we do everything. And that audit's in the system, or that airline or that ground handler shares it with the other airlines that they have, and now those other airlines don't have to do audits. So we start lessening the burden of audits for audit's sake, but what we have is a much more effective system, much better information coming into all our management systems, much better knowledge, much better learnings, which just benefits everybody. So we lessen audits, but with a better quality, and that can only benefit everybody.
So we lessen audits with a better quality, but you also mentioned, Johnny, that it requires that there is the same level of understanding of the regulations. What we often hear from organizations is that I get different interpretations on the rules when I go to different member states. So Paul, how do we make sure that the inspector, let's say in Ireland and in the Netherlands, has the same understanding of the rule and applies it in the same way?
Yeah, that's a good question, because that's a really important thing in positive effects of the cooperative oversight. As Johnny already said, and Adina also, I can only replicate it, because the fewer redundant audits is very important, because now you see that the airlines are doing the same, the ASEGO audits are the same. So it will be less, but what would be a really good positive point is that we also create a level playing field within Europe, between the European member states. Consistent safety standards, better use of regulatory resources through shared responsibilities and complementary tools with that. And we can learn from each other. Like Johnny also said, we are experienced, most of us are experienced inspectors, but we can still learn. And that's really important. We have that network of competent authority inspectors from ground handling, what Joe already mentioned earlier. Our experience will be shared as well in that network, in those network meetings. And it will help to improve the cooperative oversight, I'm sure.
Yes, indeed. You mentioned that this is actually the first time, as far as I'm concerned, I've been with EASA for 14 years, that before a regulation applies, we actually create a network of future inspectors, because the rules do not yet apply, but already for, I think, a year or so, or even more, we have had a network of future inspectors of all the EASA member states, where we are discussing on a regular basis on how we all make sure that we apply the rules in the same way. And I think John mentioned quickly, we have standardized checklists.
Yes.
Maybe Joe, can you tell us something about that? How are we developing these common checklists to make sure that we have a common understanding of the rules? And what does that really mean for a ground handling organization that will receive an inspection?
Mm-hmm. For that, I would like to refer to the regulation 2025-20 and the different topics that are mentioned, the different packages, let's say, that are mentioned in that regulation, which is applicable for the ground handling companies. So within EASA, we're working working groups. Every working group has got a different topic. For example, de-icing, anti-icing, overhaul, maintenance plans, etc. So we're working on a different questionnaires, and they will be basically the standard to be used within Europe when doing the audits, the oversight with the ground handling companies. So this is basically a reference of a standard. And what's also important, and that's what Idina, Johnny, and Paul also mentioned, is the communication between the different CAs, the findings on PBOB level, on local level. So those standards, those question lists will support us as well when changing out data or information in relation to that overview.
So thank you very much, Joe and Paul. We have now, I think, finished with our time with regards to cooperative oversight.
Can we maybe answer quickly one of the questions that were asked in the chat? Please use the Slido, because in Slido, people can also rate your question. And whereas in chat, we can only read it and answer it later. So the question related to the same topic, while we're still in the topic, is the results of the CAA audit, will they be public or only between authorities? That's an important question. It's a very good one. We gave an answer to these questions in previous discussions, webinars. So the results of the audits of the competent authorities will belong to the ground handling organization that is subject to oversight. They will not be made public. But nothing, and I repeat that, nothing will prevent the ground handling organizations from sharing their competent authority report with their airlines. That's up to the ground handling organization to decide. Given that all ground handling organizations want to have fewer audits, including fewer audits from airlines, they will probably be happy to share the results of the audits done by the competent authorities with their clients. And this is what's probably going to happen. So it's not going to be public. In no aviation domain is any audit report public. It belongs to the organization that is being subject to the audit and to the competent authority that performs the audit.
And the organization, the ground handling organization, it's up to you from the ground handling organization to decide if you want to make the audit results available to your airline operator with whom you have a contractual relationship for ground handling services. But this will not be a requirement. This will be up to the ground handling organization to decide what they want to do with the audit. Of course, we as passengers, we would all like to see what kind of audit results the airlines get when we are booking our tickets. But just as we don't have this information available when we are booking our winter holidays, our upcoming winter holidays, also we are not going to foresee that this information is publicly available. So I think that's a good question, but please use the Slido for your questions. Now, let's not invite everybody to use the chat. It's much better if you use the Slido. I already see one question has received 15 thumbs up. So from Michelle Stum something. So this means your question will be answered first. So you are the lucky winner already, I can see. So please also use the thumbs up function in Slido, because it really allows us to deal with a question that is the most critical for the audience that we have here, because we can't ask all of you 336 participants to tell us whether you like the question or not. So please use the Slido, please use the thumbs up question, even if you don't have a question yourself, because that will allow us in half an hour to really deal with the most important questions for you. Now, let's jump, if I can, to this whole question that we often get from the ground handling organizations, of whom many of us are joining us today. Thank you very much, Europe. We already suffer so much from all the audits that we are receiving every year, especially in the summertime when we really are very, very tight and our business is just going crazy. Now, on top of that, we are getting audits from the national competent authorities. Isn't it in the end going to result into fewer audits from the airline industry? That is the question that we are getting from the ground handling organizations. So now that we are going to be subject to oversight from the member states, from the competent authorities, doesn't that mean that eventually we will have a reduction in the oversight from airlines? So what is actually the secret recipe? How does it actually work in your point of view, Johnny, Paul and Chiara? How do you think that we can reduce the number of audits to which the ground handling organizations are exposed today? I'd like to first ask Chiara, how do you see it?
Yes, I think that all my colleagues have highlighted the most important thing, that is sharing experience, sharing work, sharing information. And for that, I want to do a step back, because as part I just emphasize the importance of having also a good common digital tools that allow all competent authorities to share information and cooperate as easily as possible. And EASA support will be crucial on this. Being said that, we know that one of the purpose of ground handling regulation is to reduce the number of audits. And the whole system is designed to achieve that. But all of us have to be aware that it's not an overnight process. As we said before, the cooperative oversight will allow the avoiding verification of the same documentation in every single station where ground handlers operate, because of the hub and spoke method explained. And if a ground handling organization want, they will be able to share the results of competent authority audits with their clients and the results of industry or standard audits with competent authorities. This process enables competent authorities to have a deeper knowledge of their ground handling organization and take into account the audit results for the next oversight cycle. For this reason, it's not an overnight process. It's something that will happen through the years. If this process works, we expect that the number of audits will naturally decrease.
Okay, so you're also mentioning that you as a competent authority would be interested probably to receive the audit results that the ground handler is getting from the airlines themselves. But again, that this is a voluntary exercise, that the ground handler can decide to elect this, to give more confidence to the competent authority that it is operating in a safe way. And then you will factor that into your own oversight cycle, into your own audit approach. Now that's really interesting that you also talk about this communication going via the airline to the ground handler to the competent authority. Thank you. And what do you think, Paul, would be the secret recipe to reducing the number of audits? I would ask for a quick answer because we have 4 minutes left on this part.
I can be as quick as possible because it would be, again, a repetition of what Chiara said. The secret recipe lies, to be short, in harmonization and data sharing. I think that's the most important. There will be single oversight framework. So not via airline auditing, but there will be one single framework. The risk-based approach, as Chiara also said, is important. Shared audit results. Those are those make it more comprehensive and very easy to use. Standardized methodology. In every member state, it should be done in the same way. So in short, centralized oversight plus risk-based scheduling and shared data will result into fewer and more meaningful audits.
Okay, you also mentioned more meaningful
audits because you can focus on the thing. You don't have to do in every member state the same subjects. So if something works well in many member states, you don't have to focus on that part as much.
Makes sense. Thank you. Johnny, how do you see it? Are we going to see a rapid decline of outstanding organizations, and how does it work in practice?
I think anybody who was on the previous webinar we did on talking about SMS, one of the things I said on that webinar was that the National Authority inspectors will have no expectation of a full bells and whistles working SMS from a ground handler on day one. Of course we don't. The most important thing is that the information that's built up through reporting, through really good positive reporting of near misses as well as incidents, through their own internal oversight, building up all that information within their management system is what will lead towards a mature management system. And we as authorities will stand back and want them to build that up over the years. It will take years. And the same thing applies here. We cannot just all of a sudden drop the audits and say, we're now in cooperative oversight, everything's fine. What will work with cooperative oversight in the same recipe for absolutely everything is hard work. Once the ground handling companies put in the work over this, particularly during this transition period, and try and get their management system in as good a shape as possible, try to get it as compliant as possible. That doesn't mean no findings. That doesn't mean everything's perfect. Just put the work in, and then when we start our oversight, particularly if they get those declarations in a year in advance, like we've allowed within this regulation, then we can start the build up and get the information in, which means the information comes out, and that what gives us really good cooperative oversight. So it will take as long as the ground handling organizations and the aerodromes that self-handle and the airlines self-handle, it'll take as long as they take to get the information out of it that they put in. But to make it work, the biggest thing I could say is get working now, get your systems working now, start getting the reporting information in on day one, and that will build up the information that allows us to see the great results come out, the great internal oversight, the great external oversight. The airlines, if an airline looks at your operation and says, look, we think we have a risk here, we're getting a lot of reports, we're having a lot of problems, they're going to have to keep doing oversight. So whereas if an airline's going in, or us as the authorities going in and doing oversight, and we have a couple of findings, and that's fine, findings are good, and we do a good root cause analysis and close them well, that's what leads us into really good risk-based oversight and be able to look at that information and share that information. And that answers even Michael's question there about the aerodrome, with the airport operator should I say, you know, we're doing these, do we have to keep doing duplicate audits? No, this is shared cooperative oversight. If we've done an audit of the ground handler can then share it with you as the aerodrome as well, and the aerodrome can go, great, we don't have risks here as well, we're happy with what they're doing. This demonstrates the competent authority is happy with what they're doing, their management system closed those findings well, we're happy, we're just going to keep tipping along. This is how the system works well, but it's going to be all about the initial work that's done to get those management systems up and running or get them more mature.
Yeah, and what you also said, thank you already, Johnny, for answering the question from Michelle Stamoulis, who that is voted as number one. But what you also said that the management system is really the heart where everything will be identified. But what you also said, don't rush into creating a fantastic management system that looks good on the outside. What is more important is that the ground handling organization has a stepped approach. And while you're doing it now, be transparent with your competent authority. Explain to them where are your issues, and not having any findings is not a great sign. Actually means probably that you're not getting a good oversight, but that it's normal to have findings as well, and that they help you in actually perfectionizing your management system. So that's a very important remark here, that we are not expecting to have these glossy management systems all over Europe on day one of the ground handling regulation. We know it's a journey. We understand that you as a ground handling industry, it's a big change for you. So talk to your competent authorities and get that developed together. As definitely, it's not necessary to buy a fantastic management system off the shelf and just trying to put it on your operation, even if it doesn't fit. That would be the worst thing that you can actually do. Try to build it up from the ground and try to work with your competent authority and be open and transparent. That would be the recommended path. So we have tackled now this question of, are we going to see fewer audits as a result of the ground handling regulation? Before we jump into the Q&As, we still have a last topic that we want to dive a little bit into for a couple of minutes, and that is the challenges and the preparations that we see. Because we understand that preparing the ground handling industry and the airlines and the aerodromes for this big change, but also the competent authority, is not a nice walk in the park. And while we still have a couple of months ahead of us, time is ticking right now, and the more that you are all aware, and that's why it's so great that 340 of you are joining us here at this ground handling webinar, the more of you that are aware and the more of you that are spreading the word inside your organizations about this change, the better. So what are actually the main challenges that we have already identified, or that you have already identified in the implementation of this new ground handling regulation? Now, from a competent authority point of view, but also you are already talking to your ground handling organizations. What do you hear on the ground in Europe right now? What are the main challenges? I'd like to start with Chiara.
Yeah. Well, in my opinion, the challenges are different in case of big or small companies. Johnny said that in a past webinar, I remember. Big companies often already have a good management system that includes SMS and functional interfaces with other organizations. Small companies instead are often unfamiliar with the SMS concept, so they must allocate additional resources to develop and implement this new framework. They often don't have a high safety culture. The challenge is not just implementing the written rules, but developing a true just culture to encourage reporting. Ground handling organization will need to be able to identify hazards, manage risks, monitor the effectiveness of mitigation actions, track progress, and keep safety at the core of operation. So this is, I think that this is the main challenge of the ground handling organization. As you said, also competent authorities have their challenges too, ensuring the possess the necessary resources and capabilities in terms of personnel and expertise, and we are working on that, establishing proper management system and create functional interconnection with the other domains, operation, aerodrome operation, dangerous good, de-icing, anti-icing. Ground handling is a spider with a lot of interconnection. So we need to be aware, to be also confident to have this kind of interconnection with our colleagues, so we can make cooperative oversight effective.
Thank you. Also already saying that you have at your disposal, of course, as a competent authority, you have experts in also air operations and in ground handling and in dangerous goods, for example. And how do you see it, Joe? So what are the main challenges that you have already identified in your member state with regards to the implementation of the ground handling regulation? And what have you heard also from the ground, from the industry, where they have the main challenges?
Since the publication of the 2520, we had already some comments, some feedback from the industry as part of their preparation to get in line with this new regulation. And basically, EASA, the concept, EASA, the authorities, is new for them. So they're linked to a new entity, and they have to be responsible in relation to follow up of new regulation and comply with it. They look at it as a complex system, but there is supporting information from EASA as well in relation to comply with this regulation. We also noted that the ground handling industry is a very dynamic industry, not for the contracts that are created with the operators, but also within a company, their management departments. There are quite some changes during the past years. One of the tasks that ground handlers have to do, if they already got a management system, is to update their existing management system to get it in line with the criteria as mentioned in the EASA regulation. And something very important, and that's mentioned by Chiara as well, and maybe it's an invitation for EASA as a new topic in the future for another webinar, that's the reporting and follow-up of occurrences. There's already other dedicated regulation linked to that, already supporting information, what to report, how to report. I'm referring to the ECARES platform, but that's also very important that it's basically up and running as part of the management system. And also, I would like to focus on the responsibilities of the ground handlers to check their scope. Are they within the scope to take actions? Also mentioned by Chiara about the resources that are needed to get everything done or set up. And also the maturity of the management system has also got an impact on the audit planning and the follow-up done by the inspectors of EASA in the future. So those are the topics
Thank you already
that you received from the industry.
But thank you also for giving us an insight and what you think we should focus on in the future, especially occurrence reporting. Indeed, the ground handling industry was a little bit outside the scope of this whole EU framework and is now discovering what that actually means and that they need also support in this. And then how do you see it, Paul? What are the main challenges that you hear on the ground in the Netherlands?
Yeah, most of the things are being said, but what I've heard someone say, building trust also. I think that's something which is really important. It's one of the challenges we have to deal with. In our last year, we had some information meetings about the new upcoming regulation on airports to the ground handling organizations. And we felt some suspicion or reservation, how you call it, from the ground handling organizations. They're like, well, let's see what happens. We must convince them that the new regulation on safety should not be considered as extra burden. Keep informing them regularly and stay in touch with them. And also for the competent authorities, I think we have to realize that they are the experts. We can be a ground handling expert on our level, but they are the one who are doing it. They have such a lot of knowledge about how to do it safely, which what we realize now when we talk to them, they have some good ideas, but the management won't listen because it's not mandatory, so keep it like that. They are the experts. They have very good ideas, also for us. So build trust with them. Stay in touch and listen to them. They are the ones who know it best.
Yeah, that's often very important. As a competent authority, we are able to listen, and we also understand that the industry has the knowledge, and we are able to listen to them. So now would be actually the good time for them to already reach out to the competent authorities.
Yes.
So if you are here joining us from a ground handling organization, while you think, oh, 2028, that's a long, long time ahead. I might not be even there anymore. Now is really the time to reach out to your competent authority and tell them, here, I'm here, you know, and I know I've been following these webinars and I know it's work to do, but I tell you what are my challenges and where I want to work with you. So now would already be a good time to reach out to your competent authorities. So how do we actually prepare now for competent authorities? So you are joining us from competent authorities. What do you see as the main challenges for a competent authority to actually be prepared for this D-Day in March 2028, 28th of March? 28th of March 2028. How are you preparing yourselves? I'd like to ask Joe, Chiara, Johnny, Paul, but please short, because I want to make sure that we have enough time for questions as well from the audience. So Joe, please.
So the most important task at the moment is mapping the industry. Who will be linked to the scope of this new regulation, to whom will be the new regulation applicable to. So that's our main task that we're doing right now, and also the internal preparation, the standards, the procedures that we have to set up as an authority, but also training of your colleagues to be prepared for the upcoming overview. And the most important task is to stay in close contact with the EASA and the other ground handling inspectors to support each other in relation to the preparation for 2028.
Thank you very much for this clear and short answer. Chiara, how do you see it? What is your main challenge as a competent authority?
Yes, besides what I said before about what also Joe said now, training and also creating the functional interconnection. We, as a single member state, besides participating to these webinars, we have created a working group in order to start our gap analysis. We have also identified the department that is going to work on standardization on this new domain, and in 2026 we plan to organize workshop webinars and above all start our internal training. And with the ground handling network, this very good group, we want to continue to work to ensure same interpretation of the rules, discuss possible issues on the implementation, that it's a very good thing with the real cases and some issues that ground handling organization bring to their competent authority, so we can answer the frequently asked questions received by the states and by EASA. Create common tools for the cooperative oversight, as said, common checklist, guidance material, and considering input received by ground handling organization, industry, and other domains, and use mock-up audits, participating as most as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you very much. So we heard that one of the biggest challenges is to actually find the organizations that are going to be overseen. This is what Joe said. And then you, Chiara, you also mentioned that one of the challenges is that you need to have these workshops with them and to also develop your own setup in your own competent authority of who's going what. What is it like in Ireland and the Netherlands? So Johnny and Paul. What is the biggest challenge for you as a competent authority? Do you also have difficulties to reach out to your industry, for example?
Well, yeah, obviously Ireland's being a smaller country, it's a little bit easier for me to try and pick through name by name as to who is there, but I still don't know for certain I have everybody. So I think we'll probably touch on in a moment. It's very important that the people who think they might fall under the regulation or aren't sure, that they contact us. But in Ireland, we're probably, you know, I'm looking at it. I'm looking at the difficulties. not the difficulties, but as we've already been doing oversight for so long here on ground handlers, I think the work that we're preparing is the common guidelines, the work that we're doing in EASA, that Adina there has her big stake in, is beating all of us to make sure we get it done as well and as quick as we can. Because that work leads, I know industry is concerned about different interpretations of the same rule. So within our guidelines, what we are doing within those is we'll have obviously the implementing rule we have to oversee, but then we're having suggested questions and outcomes for us with it, for the national authority inspectors, so we can kind of know what we should be looking for with that question, because many questions are written in a way that they're very relevant to one specific point, we can't use them for a different point. So by having those working, because just like everything else, there is going to, it can't be 100%, it can't be a silver bullet. We will make mistakes. We will have one person interpret one thing one way and in another country interpret it the other way. But that's why our group, that EASA has put together, our group of inspectors already meeting, we are all, every one of us, very aware that we need to work together so we can have that similar interpretation, so we can share those audits, so we can it all leans back to cooperative oversight, doesn't it, so often, but that we know that the good information is coming in that we can use. So I think from in Ireland, I'm looking at the work being done, and in the more holistic view of the EASA member states is where I'm seeing the work. And then those checklists, when they're finished, I'll just bring into my own oversight in Ireland anyway, and I'll be using them and we'll transpose them into my own kind of aid memoirs, for want of a better term.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for giving us the insight into the Irish point of view on how you're working to prepare. It also really means that if you are joining us again as a ground handling organization, reach out to your competent authority, say you're here. You don't have to be perfect now. Don't worry, even not on the 28th of March 2028. This is not the aim of the game, to identify who is perfect and who isn't, because none of us is perfect, to be honest. We all need to learn from each other, as Paula said. And the sooner that you get in touch with your competent authority and say that you're here and that you also have some questions about the rules and how to interpret the rules, the better. Because it's important for us to understand what are your concerns, what are your challenges as well, so we can better adjust our approach. Then who hasn't answered yet on this question? What is the... Yeah, Paul.
I can add something small. Because you said to the ground handling organizations, get in contact with the competent authorities. Mm-hmm. But I think the question was, how do you prepare as a competent authority? It's also the other way around. Go and do webinars, do meetings, information sessions, invite everyone who could possibly be a ground handling organization. Because some organizations don't know yet if they are in the scope of the regulation. But invite everyone and be active as a competent authority.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Now, one of the last questions before we go into the questions and answers, and we are really spot on time. This is great. We will have enough time for your top questions. So if you haven't used the Slido yet, you can find the access code in the chat. Maybe we can also put the access code again in the chat in case you can't find it. Or we share the slide where we have the Slido code. That might be good. That might be a good idea. So if you haven't put a question yet in the chat, don't worry. You can still vote the question that you find is the most interesting one. I mean, we have 300 people here joining us for this webinar. So if you want to make sure that the question that troubles you the most is really going to be addressed today in the half hour that we will have left, please make use of this voting button, because then we can make sure that we address the questions that are the most important one for the majority of the audience. But just to finish off on these challenges and how we are all preparing from the industry point of view, from the authority point of view for this new regulation, how should now the ground handling organizations themselves prepare? What is your advice? And what does that actually mean in practice? And how does the oversight really apply to the ground handling organization in practice in preparing for this new regulation? We touched upon that already a little bit, but I don't think it matters if we repeat what we said before, because now the question is really for the ground handling organizations. How should they prepare? What is your point of view now with all the knowledge that you have from the competent authorities and all the discussions that you've already had? what is your main lessons learned that you would like to transmit via this webinar to the rest of the audience? I'd like to give the floor to Johnny, then Joe and Paul. Please, again, a short answer so we have enough time for questions. So how should the ground handling organizations prepare themselves? Johnny.
I think the short answer is get to work. It really is. We have a flow chart, which I think we should share again, would be very good, which helps you, it looks at who it should apply to. So if you're not sure whether this regulation applies to you or not, you assess this flow chart with the regulation and it will confirm 100% whether you fall under this regulation or not. Because there are some allowances for people, like entities that currently fall under a separate regulation but are doing ground handling items that can then just stay under their current regulation. But it's get to work and pull whatever manuals you have, whatever information you have, start doing your gap analysis against those parts of the regulation and just see where you stand. And I would urge everybody to take advantage of declaring a year in advance, of declaring in March 2027 to your national authority, because that gives us the time to go and work together without the worry of findings, if that is a worry for you or whatever it might be. It gives you the time for a year's good work with your national authority, just leaning more into that compliance process and just getting to understand how this regulation applies. We're very aware that every ground handler is coming from zero regulation to full regulation. It's a big step. It's a huge step. The sooner you start the work, the better. Please do not sit in your hands. The last thing anybody wants is on the 27th of March 2028. No inspector wants to get a phone call to say, oh, hi, I think I fall under your regulation. That will just be the end of days for all of us. So please start the work immediately. That would be my recommendation.
Yeah, thank you, Johnny, for this clear answer. So do a gap analysis, declare already in March 2027. So that's a little bit over 12 months. Well, now we are already at the end of 26. So March 2027 is 1 year and 3 months away. So take that opportunity to already declare in advance. So it doesn't mean that you will receive a massive amount of audits. On the contrary, it's going to give confidence to your competent authority that you know what you're doing and you are willing to engage with them. And that is really all that is necessary. Thanks for that. So Joe, how do you see it? How should the ground handling organization prepare?
It's the same as Johnny has mentioned. So start reviewing the regulation, dedicated persons, dedicated departments within a ground handling company. Focus with the support of this flow chart on the scope, Article 1 and Article 2 of Regulation 2025-20, but also the declaration information, the fill-in information in the regulation, and also the annexes of the regulation. Maybe inform your authority, maybe by sending in draft declarations so that we are aware how big is your company, and start with the gap analysis. Transfer the data of the regulation to a template and start with the gap analysis as a preparation.
I already saw a question here in the Slido. What happens if we are servicing airlines outside the EU? Does the regulation apply to us? No, it does not. We can already answer that. So if you are servicing an airline outside the EU, we don't have an extraterritorial applicability of the ground handling rules. Paul, would you like to add something on how do you think that the ground handlers should actually prepare for this?
I can add something small to keep it short again. We are at EASA, we are preparing an FAQ list with frequently asked questions. Use those at that list. It would help a lot.
We will publish it before the end of the year.
Yeah, we will try to publish it before the end of the year, and it will be updated regularly because we receive many questions. The competent authorities receive many questions. EASA received them. We will put them as much as possible in the frequently asked questions list, and you learn a lot of that from them.
So you will have some work to do by the beginning of next year. We are going to upload on the EASA website a frequently asked questions list, and this will be a living thing. So we will add more answers to more questions, the ones that we see here, the ones that we get from other sources as well. So that will also be a great wealth of information that we are willing to share with everybody. Very good point. So thank you also for your work there, Paul, and also Alina, Francesca, Michelle, and the whole team. It's great that we are that we are working on making sure that we have sharing of knowledge as much as possible. So we are spot on. We still have almost half an hour for the questions. So for the questions, I think it would be best if I hand over to you, Adina, because I think you have been able to monitor the questions a little bit more than me. If that would be okay.
Absolutely. So the first question that is the most popular one is here. Let me highlight it. The airport operator also audits. I'm sorry, I haven't shared the screen with you. So
Yeah, probably could I
a second. Yeah. Right. The airport operator also audits the ground handlers as contracted services. How can we avoid duplication of audits or even conflict between the airport and the authority? If colleagues from online, if you raise your hand, you can answer. I also can answer that. So it's up to you how you, yeah, Johnny, go ahead.
Well, I think currently the ground handler is a contracted service of an airline. I think one thing that's important to remember is ground handlers are moving from being a service provider to being an operator. In the same way as an airline is an operator to an aerodrome, a ground handler will now be an operator at your aerodrome, falling under this regulation. I'm not sure how many operators actually do full oversight of ground handlers. Usually they'll do oversight of the parts that are relevant within their aerodrome manual, such as driving on the ramp or working in the ways that they define. I don't know of an aerodrome manual that dictates how to actually handle an aircraft. But it's similar enough as how I spoke before about with our cooperative oversight. If I go in and do an inspection of a ground handler, the ground handler then owns that audit and can share it. And if they have an airport operator that has items within there of ground particularly relevant to the ground handling regulation, well then they can get their answers from the oversight. And certainly speaking from the Irish viewpoint, and the same thing applies to the operators, we will be urging the operators to take on the oversight and use it in their own management system and not repeat that oversight. If I've done a full check of the training of a ground handler, then just bring that oversight into your management system. We know the operators will still want to do oversight on the passenger comfort items and their passenger experience items, maybe how they queue, maybe how their business class is boarded, whatever, that's fine, they can do that themselves. But from the aspects that are already in the regulation, if the ground handler is willing to share the audit that they've had, just bring it into your management system, Mr. Aerodrome or Mr. Airline, whatever it might be, and use that information in there well and make it part of your risk-based oversight. It works the exact same way in Michelle's question there as it would to an airline.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Johnny. So just to make it clear, please keep in mind or please remember that this is a paradigm shift, okay? Ground handling has not been regulated before, which is why the industry tried to compensate, either by applying a certain level of control from the aerodrome operators or from the aircraft operators. What's going to happen in the future is that whatever the aerodrome operators are doing now to verify the safety of safe provision of ground handling services, they will no longer have to do the same amount of verification in the future, because this is going to be the task of the competent authorities. What the aerodrome operators will continue to do is to ensure that the ground handling organizations will comply with the aerodrome manual, with the procedures directly applicable to them as aerodrome users. So the aerodrome operators will verify that whatever is under the aerodrome regulation applicable to the ground handlers and procedurized in the aerodrome manual, the ground handling organizations will do properly. And that is reducing somehow whatever the aerodrome operators are doing now to monitor, to verify, to ensure that the provision of services is done safely. So there is going to be a reduction in the tasks of the aerodrome operator, just as it's going to happen to the aircraft operators. So less verification, or the volume that will have to be verified by the aerodrome operators will be less.
And what we can maybe also say here is that the ACI, the European Airport Association, as well as the industry of ground handling, the EASA, have been very much in favor of this European regulation of ground handling safety, particularly because they saw that very often they had very little understanding of what was going on at the aerodrome with regards to ground handling. And they were really hoping, because of this regulation, that there will be more information sharing and more accessibility of data, of safety data for the aerodrome as well. So I think with that we can move to the next question.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
The scope of the basic regulations, basis for this regulation, is limited to the aerodrome. This, which would mean all activities of cargo handlers outside the perimeter of the defined aerodrome in the basic regulations are out of the ground handling regulations. Can you confirm this interpretation? So yeah, I think we received a similar kind of questions at the previous webinar. We prepared an answer, but the answer is not published yet. We will publish it next year, so from the second webinar. The idea is that the rules say if there is a warehouse adjacent to the aerodrome, meaning there is nothing in between the aerodrome boundaries and that cargo warehouse, that is going to be included in the scope. If it's not adjacent to the aerodrome, then it's not in the scope of the ground handling regulation. And so for the ones that are in the scope, so near, adjacent to, meaning in the immediate vicinity to the aerodrome boundaries, what the competent authorities will verify and what is in the scope of the regulation is only what concerns safety. So the competent authorities will not verify how the build-up of the packages and boxes in the warehouse on the shelves is going to take place. But if the warehouse also has a storage area for dangerous goods, that is going to be subject to oversight. If the warehouse is also the same place where the pallet buildup takes place, yeah, for cargo operations, that's also subject to oversight. Everything that has to do with safety, nothing else.
I think that we already addressed the next question as well, because that was about this issue of adjacent.
Yes, that as well. This one is the next. Will competent authority oversight of aircraft operators change as a result of the ground handling regulations? Yes, it will change. Any of you colleagues online would like to add something or to explain, or shall I continue?
I think the only thing that won't change will be outside the member states. It'll be a contracted activity for anybody who falls under a member state AOC. That will remain the same, but within the member states, yes, it will, of course, change.
It will, exactly. As I explained previously, and you, Johnny, related to the aerodrome operators, how much control they exercise over ground handling organizations, the same thing is valid for aircraft operators. So the aircraft operators will continue to remain responsible for the flight safety and for the aircraft, or the safety of the aircraft. But the ground handling organizations will become accountable and responsible for the safe provision of the ground handling services, which means that in the future, the aircraft operators, also considering the future oversight done by the competent authorities, the aircraft operators can reduce how much or how frequently they will want to verify their ground handling organizations. They can focus more on what matters to them, for example, on their own operating procedures that the ground handling organization will have to apply, or the aircraft operators will want to compensate for some high-risk activities where it's possible that the competent authority will not verify every year, and I'm referring here to the de-icing services, to the de-icing operations. It's possible that in Northern Europe, the competent authorities will verify the de-icing preparation, also the preparation for the winter season every year. But it's also possible that they may not do that every year, which means this enables the aircraft operators to continue to put their efforts into where it matters most for them. So, considering this, we also took into account the fact that the Air Ops rules had to be amended in order to enable this performance-based verification or risk-based verification. Let's not call it oversight, because the oversight is a term we use for the competent authority oversight. So the aircraft operators will be able also to implement this risk-based and performance-based verification, which means that they don't need to verify the ground handlers every 2 years, but less frequently. Also considering that it's very likely that the competent authority audit reports will be shared by the ground handling organizations with them, with the aircraft operators. So the things will change also for the aircraft operators at European aerodromes, at the aerodromes of the EU. Member states. The next one is the usual industry standards for audit intervals are 24 months without limit for more, usually maximum 36 months. How will this be handled for aircraft operators when the cycle for ground handlers can be extended up to 72 months? Is EASA in touch with ICAO and IATA for an alignment? So, okay, that's exact. I think that I answered part of the question in the previous question, actually. So the EU rules are now flexible, yeah, when it comes to whether the aircraft operator wants to apply a 24-month cycle or a larger or wider cycle. What else? Maximum 36 months, I think.
Well, I think aerodromes are already 48 months, Adina. Many aerodrome, like certainly here in the IAA, it's 48 months is the aerodrome oversight cycle, and that matches to that. That matches to what will be the ground handling cycle.
So the fact that the regulation, exactly, Johnny, that the regulations establish 48 months for aerodrome operators, also 48 months for ground handling organizations, plus or minus, with the possibility to extend or to reduce this cycle. Now, the aircraft operators, if they want to maintain the same 24-month cycle, yeah, nothing will prevent them from doing that, because the AirOps rules related to contracted activities does not prevent them from doing that. But who would be willing to do a 24-month cycle of verification under the compliance monitoring function if this is not necessary? That's how you need to ask yourselves as aircraft operators. Yeah, of course, you can maintain the same cycle that you have today, but if this is not necessary, you can also extend your period in which you verify your ground handling organizations up to how much you want. So the AirOps rules will enable you to apply a performance-based verification, a risk-based verification, meaning that you can verify your ground handling organizations as frequently as necessary, or as rarely as necessary. That's going to be for you to for you aircraft operators to decide. Yes, EASA is in touch with ICAO. Yes, EASA is working very closely with IATA for everything related to ground handling.
We had the rulemaking task going on from 2018 to 2024, so over a period of 6 years. And as EASA, we had extensive contact with IATA because, of course, we knew that the IATA standard, industry standard, was the one that was the most prominent and it was the most widely used. So we had extensive exchanges with IATA during the whole rulemaking process, and also experts from airlines, from airports, from ground handling organizations, from member states. They all worked with us in what we call a rulemaking group for many, many years. And we must thank them actually at every webinar that they were so dedicated and so persistent in supporting this rulemaking task. And IATA was also included there in this
Exactly.
in this rulemaking group. So yeah, we definitely made sure that we are aligning and that we're learning from each other, and that we make sure that we only regulate things at European level where it makes sense, and that we leave things at industry standards level where they are much better dealt with. Absolutely. At industry standards level. Absolutely.
The next question is, will there be more webinars from EASA regarding 2025/20 during 2026? Yes, that's a quick answer. Yes, we plan to organize a webinar every quarter. So we plan at least 4 webinars for 2026 in which we will tackle more topics from Regulation 20. We will also probably repeat some of the information we already provided on other topics this year about this Regulation 20. So we will bring new elements. We will also repeat the most important elements that we already discussed in the previous webinar. So yeah, at least 4 webinars next year and also in 2027. The cycle will continue for the whole duration of the transition period. Last webinar questions and responses are not available yet. Yes, so we are working on finalizing, so fine-tuning our answers, and we expect that they will be published next week.
Yeah, it's just that you ask always a lot of questions and then it takes us to them. But that's good because we are happy that the questions are being asked. It tells us that we are on the right track and that you are engaging with us. That's great. Thank you so much for all the questions that we see.
The next question is, which role, if any, do the competent authorities envisage for the airport operators in the oversight of ground handling service providers? Now, the answer is, while the responsibility for oversight remains wholly and only with the competent authorities, the oversight rules, now I don't remember which one, I think it's ARGH OVS 305, but I'm not so sure, also enables the possibility for competent authorities to get informed when they conduct an oversight from any source possible about the safety performance of the ground handling organization that is going to be subject to oversight. Any source means any other audit report that is available to the competent authorities. Some of the information may come from the aerodrome operators. Some of the information may come directly from the ground handling organization via audits done by the industry. That's going to be up to every competent authority to decide what sources of information and to what extent they will want to use those sources of information and the available information to prepare themselves to conduct oversight. Now, so as I mentioned before, the airport operators are not expected to take over the task of the competent authority. What they will do is to verify that whatever is in the aerodrome manual as procedures or instructions or programs, like the FOD program, for example, is properly, correctly implemented by the ground handling organization at that aerodrome. If colleagues, you would like to add something?
It's exactly what you said. It's only a small role. They don't take over anything from the competent authority. That's the responsibility of the competent authority, but just to check the compliance with the procedures of the airport operators.
Okay. The next question, supposedly the competent authorities will audit the ground handlers. In order to understand better the focus of such an audit, would appreciate EASA to share a template of such audits so that we can directly adapt our SMS and ops manuals accordingly prior to the audit. If not available as of yet, when? So these would be the oversight checklists that the group of inspectors, the ground handling network, are working on right now. Right, colleagues?
I think
Paul,
that's
Johnny,
what
Joe, Chiara.
That's correct.
It's just trying to understand where's that question coming from? Is it from an airline or is it from if it's from a ground handler, then your scope is the implementing rules that are relevant to you. That's the scope of your SMS and your ops manual. Certainly your SMS is orgh.mgm.200 is what you need to comply with, and you comply with that, then you're good to go.
Yeah, I don't really see to share a template of such an audit would help to adapt the SMS.
Maybe to share templates of checklists.
Yeah, but to adapt the SMS and ops manuals accordingly, it should be, you take that the rules, the regulation, it should be.
Yeah.
I don't see sharing the checklists. I don't see that being a problem. I think that will be, they're going to see it anyway when they're sitting across the table from us.
Actually, we were discussing that last week at our last meeting with the competent authorities. Should these checklists be shared with the ground handling organizations or not before the audit takes place to help them better prepare?
It has pros and cons. The pros is that they know what to expect. The cons could be, and that's what I experienced in the past, that they would answer the questions on the checklist, and that's it. And then you don't have a system yet. But it could. We haven't decided yet.
Martina, if I may, we discussed a lot about that, and I understand that we are not decided yet about the sharing of before the audit, the checklist. But what I want to say to the ground handlers is that we will not check other than what is regulated by the regulation. So if you read the step by step, rule by rule, MMC and guidance material, I think that every ground handlers could understand what we will going to check in the future. And then also every competent authority could will be able to do an announced inspection, other inspections. So it's not only about the audit, it's about the regulation. Every rule can be, it must be read with all the words. So every ground handler could understand what we will check with the audit.
I think the real revolution that we have here in ground handling is that we are preparing the member states together. We are standardizing the member states from the start so that all the inspectors have the same understanding of the regulations. And I think this is the huge benefit of these checklists, if you call it that way, that you as a ground handling industry, you can be assured that there is a common understanding, and we are actually developing this now across the EU, and that you will not have different opinions depending on the member state inspector that you will receive. And I think this is really the revolutionary thing that we are doing here. It also shows the willingness of the member states to work together from the start, which is great. And it will only be for the benefit of the ground handling industry. And we will learn even more during the mock-up audits. So nothing is set in stone yet. We still have 2 years to prepare. And with the mock-up audits, we will get a lot of knowledge from the industry, from the ground handling organizations. So I think that is really the benefit of trying to work from the same sheet of music from the start, and always understanding how the tune sounds, and it sounds the same way no matter where you are. This is our main aim here.
Yeah. And if in the end the competent authority inspectors of this ground handling network that we have will decide to make the checklists available, we can publish them on the EASA website. I'm thinking now of the example that we already have, the colleagues in the flight time limitations domain, the FTL checklists are already published on the EASA website. So there's no secret about that. They can be published, of course. So if this is the decision of the ground handling network of authorities, we will go for it.
But they're good examples. Okay.
Yeah, they are good examples. Yes. So the next question. Sorry. How will EASA work to harmonize the different regulations, regulatives? One will need the same wording in the ground handling regulations, air ops and aerodrome regulations to avoid different interpretations. So we have 2 annexes or parts of those 2 annexes that are repetitive in every aviation domain. The AR, the authority requirements, and the OR, the general organizational requirements. And we are aligning. So I think that this can be part of the future simplification task that the EASA has. But we are also trying to maintain those AR requirements and OR requirements as much aligned as possible, and only have differences where the domain specifications require those differences. So before we end the meeting, before we end this webinar, we have activated another poll. We would appreciate a lot if you could answer this poll for us to know if this webinar helped you, because that will encourage us to do more activities and more, I don't know if webinars or other types of us communicating with you to help you with the implementation of the ground handling regs. So thank you in advance for answering, or if you have already answered, that is going to help us a lot. And we will do the same for the questions that are yet unanswered. We will take them on board, provide an answer, and we will publish them on the EASA website under the event page. And as of next year, we are already working on having a dedicated ground handling page as a new EASA domain, where you will find all the Q&As, all the necessary links, and the future material that we will develop.
And I also asked another question: what topics would you like us to explore at the next implementation support webinar, so that we also understand what were you missing today, what is still not clear, what you want us to focus on in 2026. Then please also just fill in this Slido while you're leaving us. So for the first one, we see that most of you are quite happy with this webinar, but you also probably think that you still don't know enough and you would like to deepen your knowledge even further. That's great.
Yes, that will help us to decide on the topics, even though we have a plan already, but we will consider your feedback first. So thank you very much for helping us to help you.